most expensive player in English football history. He played in a Champions League final and of course was one of France's best players as they won the 2018 World Cup. He's always been a bit of a controversial figure, mainly due to his performances on the field with Manchester United, and many people calling him out for a lack of effort or professionalism, rather harshly in my opinion. Anyways, for all the controversies off the field, Pogba has had a lot more of it. You probably are aware of the drugs scandal where he was banned from football for 18 months, but one you might not know about is one of the craziest blackmail plots in football history. This story involves a family betrayal, witch doctors casting spells on Kylian Mbappe, guns, crypto, blown up cars, Twitter videos, and eventually a prison sentence. So strap in, this is gonna get crazy because this is the wild story of how Paul Pogba was blackmailed. Now this is I guess, extension of a true crime series we are doing on the channel, going through football true crime stories. Make sure to check out the other videos we have made. We've covered Quincy Promes, we've covered Karim Benzema, and we've covered some others too, so I'll leave a link in the description to the playlist where you can check those out. But let me know if you enjoy this and we can do some others. But without further ado, sit back, relax, and let me tell you about the story of Paul Pogba. So, Paul Pogba grew up in the suburbs of Paris with his two Guinean parents and two older brothers who were actually twins, Florentine and Matthias. All three brothers loved football and played from a young age, and actually all three made it pro, which is pretty crazy. Florentine went to Spain with Celta Vigo early in his career, and then played for numerous French clubs, playing the bulk of it for Saint-Étienne. He wasn't some big name, but nonetheless still made it pro. Matthias had a bit of an unorthodox path, going to England and playing through the non-leagues for the likes of Wrexham and Crewe, played in Italy, Scotland, or he just hopped around a bunch of places. Again, it wasn't a spectacular career, but he still made it pro. However, as we all know, the crown jewel of the Pogba brothers was Paul. He would join the Man United Academy, and from a very young age in the United Academy, it was clear he was going to become a superstar, which he did. Paul would join Juventus and become one of the best midfielders in the world before returning to United for a then British record fee. He had his good and bad moments for United, and after leaving, of course, he has struggled, but the peak of Paul's career was definitely in 2018 when he lifted that World Cup trophy. Now, while all this was happening, from the outside looking in, nothing seemed too strange. In fact, it looked like it was quite the happy family in the Pogba household. But this, you see, was the problem. Matthias was not only felt like a failure and felt annoyed that Paul was so successful compared to him, but he felt he was the reason Paul was so successful. Matthias helped Paul in his early days and for a lot of his career, and therefore felt like Paul owed him something in return. Now, Paul and Matthias were close, and of course Paul gave Matthias lots of money and gifts, but Matthias wanted that lifestyle that Paul had. He wanted to live the multi-millionaire luxury life, and he felt he deserved that for helping Paul. But of course he couldn't just ask Paul for millions of pounds, so he had to find a way to get this money. Now this is where we need to go back a little bit to set the scene. You see, Paul was a wonder kid. It was very clear from a young age he was going to be a superstar. At age 14 he was already signed to a professional French club, and 2 years later he was off to Manchester United. The brothers grew up in the Paris suburbs, which is quite a rough area full of gangs and criminals. But given how Paul was already destined to be a superstar, he didn't really get too involved in that stuff and escaped any real involvement in gang violence. Florentine, again for similar reasons, didn't get too involved. However, Matthias, as he wasn't such a superstar from a young age, did get involved a bit in this stuff. He started getting connections and having friends with these people in gangs. Now, nothing happened immediately, and of course Matthias eventually made it out of those suburbs, but he still had friends within those communities. And this is where the real crimes begin. It's the evening of March the 9th, 2022. That day, as the French national team gathered in Clairefontaine, which is the France National Football Centre, Pogba, who was called up to the national team, was there, and he had just spent several hours with a childhood friend called Boubacar, and they were spending time in La Renaudière, which was actually the neighbourhood where they both grew up. Now, around midnight, as Pogba was about to return to his Paris hotel, Pogba was actually led by some other friends from his childhood area called Adama, Rushdie, and two brothers, the Machagot brothers. They led him to an apartment in another city close by. There, the footballer was forced to turn off his phone, and it was taken from him. Then two heavily armed, hooded men wearing bulletproof vests appeared. Rushdie, Pogba's friend, ordered Paul to pay 13 million euros, including 3 million in cash, while the armed men were holding guns to Pogba's head. Now, the reason for the money was very odd. They claimed they had been giving him secret protection for years, protecting Paul from gangs in Paris, and now seeked compensation. They also tried to blackmail Paul into paying. Now, what were they blackmailing him with? Well, according to Paul, after recounting the story, he said one of the suspects threatened to disclose contents of a USB stick, and on that USB stick it showed that Pogba paid a witch doctor to cast a spell on his opponents and also on his French teammate Kylian Mbappe. Yeah, very, very weird. Now, that USB stick, I don't think has ever been found or disclosed to the public, so I don't know if that's actually true, but a bit of a wild thing to blackmail him with. Now, Paul was of course scared for his life, being held at gunpoint, and told them he was going to pay. He told the police that they shouted, "Shut up, look down," and then one of the two hooded men spoke in Rushdie's ear, and when the hooded guys left, Rushdie told Paul that he had to pay them, otherwise all of them were going to be in danger. Now, Paul did initially try to actually pay his blackmailers. His bank, however, refused to release the funds due to the suspicious nature of the request. And after further pressure, in spring the player agreed to provide 100,000 euros in cash to Boubacar back in Manchester. He had also signed a document committing him to investments in crypto through a transfer of funds to a company. Paul then asked his Italian bank to transfer 13 million euros to his account in Dubai, where he was then going to transfer to Adama's account in Dubai. also appears that €47,000 worth of purchases were made at a Adidas store in France on behalf of Paul Pogba's accounts in March, which is likely from the blackmailers. Meanwhile, €200,000 were also taken from Paul Pogba and given to Mamadou. However, once he was finally about to transfer that €13 million to Adama, Paul changed his mind and decided to report them to the police. Now, you're probably thinking, what role did Matthias Pogba play in this case? Why did I even mention him? Why was I speaking about him before? Now, Matthias said he only learned on July through two of the suspects that his brother had been threatened in March. He went to Turin when Paul Pogba was playing for Juve back in July with several of the suspects to meet his brother at the Juventus training centre. However, they didn't end up seeing each other. And then suddenly Matthias on July the 30th started sending Paul threatening messages telling him to pay the guys. The next day, Matthias, who at the time was staying with his mother, opened the door. There was a knock at the door and he opened the door, and the four suspects, the four people who had blackmailed Paul, came in. Matthias welcomed them into the house and got them to speak to Paul's mum, where they tried to threaten Paul's mum into forcing Pogba to pay. Paul's mum received another visit back in Nice on August 13th by these people, again threatening her to tell Paul to pay. So at this point, it looks like Matthias now and his mum were now being dragged into this, and this whole situation is an absolute mess. You've got Paul held at gunpoint and blackmailed for $13 million by his own childhood friends. He's trying to pay them slowly. Meanwhile, his mother is now being threatened if he doesn't pay. So Paul had to do something, which is why he decided to not go through with the transfer and told the police. They started doing investigations. But then the investigations took a bizarre new twist in September 2022, when Matthias released a long string of videos on Twitter taking aim at his brother. More than 30 videos of Matthias Pogba reading a statement many pages long were posted, saying, "If you are watching this video, that will be because my brother Paul Pogba has found a way to silence me. I record this video so whatever happens, everything is revealed." The words "insurance video held in a safe place" were written on top of many of the videos. They followed through on previous posts where Matthias threatened to make explosive revelations about his brother. In the recordings, Matthias accused his brother of having abandoned members of their family, leaving them in poverty. He also claimed that the midfielder mixed with criminals, and he also repeated the claims that Paul employed a witch doctor. Although he did not bring any proof to substantiate his accusations. According to Matthias' claims, the witch doctor is close to former France international Alou Diarra, and Paul was introduced to him by former PSG man Serge Aurier. He said that over the years the France midfielder had spent millions for the services of the witch doctor, asking him, for instance, to help France win the World Cup, or to asked for Witch Doctor to neutralise Mbappe for the return leg of a Champions League match between PSG and Man United back in 2019. And to be fair, United did win that game 3-1 and go to the quarters. Hey, maybe it could be true. The videos were also accompanied by a series of Twitter posts and a statement addressed to Paul. The first post in a long thread said it had been automatically sent by bots, and that means that Matthias is no longer free. Matthias said his life was now in danger because his brother had betrayed his henchmen, who are taking aim at his entourage. He said that some of his relatives had already been assaulted and shot at because of his brother. So now, this was already a mess, but this is, I don't know what on earth is going on. You've got some wild accusations from Matthias, which most likely are not true at all, as he has provided zero evidence for these claims. And it seems like it was just a bit of a desperate plea from Matthias to tarnish Paul's name in the public image, as he knew the police were after him. And not long after, eventually the police indicted all 5 suspects, including Matthias. All 5 suspects claimed to have been subjected to pressure threats from a second circle of blackmailers. Boubacar claimed that 3 hooded individuals threatened him to threaten Paul for money. This then led him to be claiming he was a victim in the case and he was manipulated. Mamadou, another suspect, claimed his car was set on fire in the Paris region in mid-July, and Matthias and 2 of the suspects at the end of July had guns pointed to them by several men, with one of them telling Matthias, "Tell your brother to find a solution quickly." Meanwhile, Rushdane was actually shot in the hand. In police custody, Matthias Pogba said he posted the videos on social media at the end of August because he was afraid of the armed men. He said he did it to make his brother talk. Now, eventually, they were all trialed and they were found guilty of extortion and other crimes. Matthias was sentenced to a 3-year jail term, 2 years suspended but avoided time behind bars, and instead served 1 year wearing an electric bracelet. It turns out then that Matthias was the one behind this blackmail attempt, or really he was involved in it, and when Paul was held at gunpoint, Matthias was aware and helped organise that, and then, of course, was helping them threaten Paul and threaten Paul's mother and his own mother for the money. The other 5 people were handed some sentences. Rushdane received 8 years, Boubacar 4 years, Adama 5 years, Mamadou 5 years, and the Major brother 3 years in prison. So, that was the wild family affairs of Paul Pogba. In the end, Paul Pogba gave away hundreds of thousands of euros to these guys, but did not give them 13 million. And I think it is important to note just how much this affected Paul, because imagine being held at gunpoint, being extorted for millions of euros, fearing for your own life, at first by your own childhood friends who you grew up with. You thought they were your brothers and they stabbed you in the back, but then to make it worse, your actual blood, your own brother, was also involved in this plot to blackmail you and went online spewing some absolute nonsense to try and tarnish your name. Paul Paul spoke about wanting to retire due to the incident back in 2022, and he said, "Sometimes I was just by myself thinking, I don't want to have money anymore, I don't want to play anymore, I just want to be a normal person." Of course, Paul, not too long after, would actually be banned himself from football after being done for doping. So that was added on top, and you really can imagine how difficult a time this was in his life. And think of the amount of trust issues Paul must have from this. Again, his own brother and his childhood's best friends were blackmailing him for millions of euros and threatening him and keeping him at gunpoint. It's absolutely wild. Now, if you're wondering about what Matthias is doing, so Matthias is free, and I'm unsure whether they still talk. I highly doubt they still talk to each other. But still to this day, he denies ever being involved, and he is also not playing professional football right now. I'm not entirely sure what he's doing. Meanwhile, Paul is trying to rebuild his football career, putting all of his behind him. Back in France now with Monaco. And I really do wish him the best. I really do hope he can find himself, because, well, yes, it's been difficult for him on the pitch, but I can't imagine how much this has affected his personal life and his mental well-being, going through this amount of craziness in the space of 2-3 years. I'm sure deep down is still hurting over how his own blood betrayed him for a bit of money. So, there we go. That was the wild story of Paul Pogba. A little bit different, as we were talking about a victim of a crime in football. We usually talk about the actual criminals committing the crime, but yeah, hopefully you guys do enjoy. If you want me to make more of these, let me know in the comments below, and let me know if it's a story about a player you want me to do next. And if you guys have enjoyed this video, please do leave a like, consider subscribing. I'll see. Have a